the PDSA cycle, again, it's a structured experimental learning approach to testing changes. It's one, as I mentioned earlier, has made it through several iterations of different improvement models that have been introduced over the years. It's Dr. Deming introduced us to this, although he called it the Schuhart model. And probably the most important word in here is that it's a cycle. It's a cycle. It's all four of these things working together like a little engine. I say that because I see a lot of folks who think they're doing PDSAs, but they are rather stuck in the P phase, the planning phase. This is what I call PDSA's evil cousin P. It's so easy to sit around, get stuck sitting around a meeting table and spending an enormous amount of time in the planning phase, which is great and it's necessary, but just having meeting after meeting and not doing anything with what's being planned. There's no learning in just sitting around the table and planning. I also see, perhaps even more than that, is the tendency to just do things, and without sufficient planning, just doing things and doing and doing and doing, because that's what gets, noticed, right? In our society, doing gets noticed. But again, in just doing something without a prediction about what we think is going to happen, there's no learning in that. And again, PDSAs are about learning, not just about doing things. So I could do this call again and again and again the very same way, and I'd be learning nothing. But I have a plan. Instead, I have a plan. We're doing it. We're going to look at evaluations. And if I'm ever invited back to do another call, you can bet I will enter in, I'll study it, I'll take some action and probably adapt it a bit and try another plan. That's where the learning comes in. And then we move to study, but I do see teams get stuck in analysis paralysis. We get stuck in kicking around data and baseline, and again, kind of get stuck like we do in planning. We don't want that to happen because then we can't take that sufficient next action. Another thing that I see some folks do is, that action is we decide, did this, based on what we studied, we planned, we did it, we studied it, and based on what we learned, are we going to adapt it and try it again, which we often do? Are we going to adopt it and scale it up and test larger? Or are we going to abandon it and try something differently? And I don't see that last option used much. And we should, I think, use things more often. If it doesn't work, abandon that and test something else, small scale. The other important part about PDSAs is we do encourage that particularly early changes be done on a small scale, because that way we can learn from them, right? We can learn from them. So it's this idea of early tests, as you see on the screen. We'll design early tests that are simple and that we can learn from. So we will test and engage in testing with our friendly providers and the friendly folks who have the will and they're behind us. Or we'll test, if you're in a hospital, we often test on days instead of nights because of the resources. The resources are different. So we test where we are most likely to succeed, and then we gradually scale our tests up so that eventually we're testing bigger, and we're testing under different conditions and in places where it's more apt to fail, like evenings where there's different resources, right, in hospitals, or times when the flu, flu season, and you're testing things in a practice. Let's test during safer times when we're fully staffed, and then we'll test later. And then, of course, gradually we build to more robust testing, and then gradually to implementation, where we also use PDSAs to implement things. It's just that we've tested them so much that our chances that those tests will fail are probably less. So it's kind of cool. And another here on your screen is an example of that idea of robust testing using in developmental screening project that I worked on. we started testing with the 9-month screen and incorporating developmental screening into that visit with one patient to see how that went, because the 9-month visit is a place where it worked. There was enough room in that visit to play with that sum, to test it, and then we scaled it up to use a revised form and sheet with 2 more patients. And then eventually we scaled it up to test at the 18-month screen, because there's a lot going on. If any of you work in pediatric practices, there's a lot going on at the 18-month screen. So we knew it would be harder there. And then we build until finally developmental screening was in these practices implemented for 9, 18, and 24, 30-month visits. So that's how we scale up change using PDSA cycles. And it's, again, small, iterative tests. We might be doing tens, hundreds of tests during any given day, but they'll all build on each other.